Ta-da. Okay, welcome. Where are we? August 17th? Something like that. Nice to see you all. Um, as you may or may not know, we're doing these Saturday night rooms for a while now, and the topics are often a little different.
Very different.
They're going to be very different for a while going forward, I would say. Probably now till Sukkot, we're going to deal with something new, and then we're going to do our Ushpizin movie night conferences during Sukkot, which is somewhere in October this year. So yeah, so maybe about the next 8 weeks or so, we're going to be focused on some type of study here. I want to pull up share on screen, not share the singer, no share. Yeah, no. Torah, is this what I want? Let's see.
I got it. Ready to go.
Yeah, hold on. Okay, so let's close some of these windows here. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So this is our, so basically we had a lot of ideas floating around here. What?
Oh, yeah. Okay, you got Facebook.
Yeah, I got Facebook open on
Okay.
purpose, yeah. We had a lot of ideas that we've been working on floating around, and they kind of gelled together here in terms of things we've been looking at, researching, and wanting to talk about. And there were people asking about, well, can we have like, kind of a group or room or whatever on, what the Torah and the Tanakh and the sages say about the days of before Mashiach and all that. And we're looking at Vilna Gaon, especially lately. So it all kind of gelled together here that we can have a study, a group going forward that kind of encompasses all of these things. So in terms of having a basic structure to start with, we were looking at something written by the Vilna Gaon, how he talked about there's these things in the world in three particular categories of things that are kind of disunified or have other issues, and they're all going to come together one day, and we're going to see some signs of these things coming together in the days before, like the Messianic realm, and obviously before Olam Haba. So if you haven't seen it yet, this is the outline that's on the screen right now, and the three things that the Vilna Gaon talked about coming together with the things in the land of Israel, which is now very secular and has a lot of issues. How physical science and Torah have been separate over the centuries, and they're coming together, and then just global spirituality being so fractured, and that's all going to come together. So those are the three major categories of things. So from that, we're breaking it down a little bit more, and this is just a first draft, I guess that's what you call it, right? A first draft outline of things to talk about underneath those three headings, which you see below. And we're kind of, in one sense, winging this, in that it's not necessarily going to go in a certain order. But I think, generally speaking, we're going to kind of touch on everything over these next 8 weeks, go through Sukkot, and then come back to it and take it at a whole other level after Sukkot. That's, in my mind, the tentative plan. And when I say another level, I mean, we're talking about like connectivity between a lot of these things, because there's a lot of interesting and hidden connectivity. We were just chatting today how we were briefly talking last week, and again this week we're going to talk about the idea of the 12 tribes and the 10 lost tribes, that whole idea. And there's a lot of real interesting things in the video we're going to watch. We haven't seen it yet, but we're going to watch it and break it down and then take it a little further in places. And just also the idea of this like relationship between things like the idea of the 12 tribes and even the idea of meditation. And it's like, well, how do those things connect? And that's getting at a whole other level of looking at things in a very unified state. So that'll be like in phase 2, probably after, I don't do phases, right? Phase 2 after Sukkot. For now, though, this is what we're going to do. So we're going to talk a little bit more this week about the 12 tribes and the 10 lost tribes. We have a video that is outstanding. It's pretty recent, showing some of the real interesting connections that are out there. People around the world that are reaching back saying, hey, we do all these things. We have all these customs, traditions. We're Jewish. We're in all these places around the world, obscure places. What that means, including ideas of why some of the people on the earth today, on the planet today, believe it or not, who are some of the people who are kind of most anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, are actually, believe it or not, connected to these lost tribes. And there's reasons for all of this stuff. It's absolutely crazy. So we're going to have this this video for tonight, talk a little bit more about the tribes, and then we'll probably next week go to a different topic. May or may not be the next one on the list, but we'll see. But it'll all connect eventually. So I'm going to, what do you think? Does it need any more setup, or should we just start? We're going to break this video up. It is over an hour. We're going to skip the first 6 minutes of an introduction and get right to the main speaker. So I'm going to, are you queuing up the video?
Yeah,
At the 6 minute mark?
it's, I don't know what's going on, it's spinning.
Oh, I can.
Oh, I think it's working now.
You can cue it up to the 6 minute mark exactly. That's about when the other rabbi takes the mic to talk about these things.
Poston is my favorite, one of my favorites.
So hold on, and while we get this ready, and I'm going to. Am I sharing the screen? I am sharing the screen. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and we're going to figure out a few breaks. We're not going to watch it like a whole hour plus through. We'll probably break it up into maybe about 3 or 4 chunks and pause in between and have a little discussion, especially if there's some significant things. I think we're just going to look at each other at this end and say, yeah, maybe we should pause it here. So we're not sure exactly when we're going to pause it, but whenever it seems to make sense. So if you've all got your favorite beverages and cookies in hand, yeah, probably 15, 20-minute breaks. Again, it depends. There's some of it at the beginning. It might go a little longer for the first segment because there's a lot of, but when it gets deep, we're going to pause. So, all right. So I'm going to stop sharing and let you make sure you have your audio on too. Click that, the little button. Yeah. I'm trying to click it. There we go. And I'm going to quiet my mic here.
Amen. Appreciate everyone coming tonight. Actually, just today I got over a 3-day virus. I haven't eaten in 3 days, so I kind of feel like Esther before she goes for the king, she fasted. But obviously in this case, I don't feel like my death's at hand if I don't impress everyone in the room. But I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to start off tonight just giving a little background of myself and how I got into the field we're going to discuss, and then we're going to go into a few different topics after that. So it may start off seeming like a story, but then it's going to get into very heavy information. I had, first of all, I'm a descendant of the Vilna Gaon, and randomly about 10 years ago, I was in New York City, I had this strong calling and a strong vision to get land in Israel. I didn't know why or what I was supposed to do with it, but I had this feeling. And simultaneously, I was reading a book called Im Habanim Smecha by Rabbi Teichtel, an incredible book. It speaks about the whole generation that we're up against right now and really decoding it. And he gave a piece of advice for anyone who wants to get land in Israel. And he said, this is guaranteed to work. So I'm going to tell it to you guys right now because I hope everyone else can implement it. He said there's a word in Hebrew called the teshukah, desire. And he said, just like the mother calf has more of a desire to give the baby calf milk than the baby calf has a desire to receive the milk. We would all think it's the opposite. He says the rain has more of a desire to give the land its water than the land has to receive it. We would think it's the opposite. So they said the heavens today have a strong desire to settle the children of Israel in the land of Israel, more than we know, more than we want. So it said we have to learn how to tap into that want, and the heavens will help us. So basically, he said, what you have to do is when people complain to God, they say, God, how come you didn't bless me? We say, God doesn't bless humans. He blesses their handiwork, what they do with their hands. So he says, create a vessel, and whatever vessel you create, if it's with a group of like-minded people who are very close with each other and have a lot of love with each other, it's guaranteed success. And if it's geared towards settling the land of Israel, unconditional, it's going to succeed. So I said, that's great. That's all we have to do, So I gathered a few of my closest friends in a room, great guys, and we said, let's come up with an idea of what we're going to do to settle the land of Israel and get land. First friend of mine said, let's start a brewery. We said, okay, that's a great idea. We all like beer. People like beer. We'll get some land. We'll build a brewery and it'll work. So we booked the first flight to Israel and we drove around the Galiel to every moshav and kibbutz in the north looking for a place to build a brewery. Obviously a lot of politics, but there were a lot of empty kibbutzim and empty moshavs, and we'd go to them and say, hey, you guys want a bunch of young Americans to come volunteer and work? We'll put some capital in and help you. They said, yeah, it sounds like a good idea to me, but there's 30 people in the kibbutz who also need to approve this, and you have to have meetings with each one. They also have their own vision, what they want to do there. Maybe build a hotel one day, maybe not. And so we got passed around from place to place. And throughout our journey, we heard that there were 2 tribes in Israel, from the lost tribes of Israel, which we'll get into, who came back to Israel with ancient beer recipes. This was the Ethiopians and the Bnei Menashe from India. The Ethiopians came back with a drink called tej, a honey brew, and the Bnei Menashe from India came back with a drink called zu. It's like a type of a rice sake. And so the first thing I did, I stopped the first Ethiopian I saw on the street, and I said, hey, excuse me, sir, do you have a tribal leader in your tribe or someone I could speak to? And he said, sure, here's the leader of our tribe, here's his number. So I called the leader, I said, excuse me, you don't know me, but I'm from New York, and I have this idea, I'd like to make your recipes. And he said, okay, please, come, I'll introduce you to our brewmaster. You know, next thing you know, we're with an elderly lady who were traditionally the brewmasters of their tribes. What was it? Oh, no problem. And we learned the recipe. And so while we were going around shopping for land in Israel, we realized this is a very long, difficult process. We're not going to get land in the next month or 2, but we're here. We're stuck in New York City. We got a great company name. We got a great brand. Let's start the company in New York City, and when Israel land ready, we'll move it over there. So that's what we did. We started a company in New York City called Lost Tribes Beverage, and we started making these recipes, and we were in New York City, and it happened to be a lot of these big startup companies in New York City are all owned by young Jews in their 20s and 30s, and so it was very beneficial for us to network, and our beer got everywhere in the city, and it was really popular, and we had a lot of fun. And this is not the purpose of the story, but because of this, I'll tell you what happened. Anyone who typed in at this period of time, I don't know what it is today, this was about 8-9 years ago, who typed in the words Lost Tribes in Google, our company was coming up first. And all of a sudden, we started getting emails from around the world from people saying, hey, we're from the Lost Tribes of Israel. From India, from Africa, from Afghanistan, Japan, you name it. It was coming in like every day from all, and I said, this is crazy, what's going on? Because I was in yeshiva, I was a student, I was studying Torah, I had no clue what anyone was talking about. I thought the only remnants of the people of Israel were the Jewish people. So who were these people, the lost tribes of Israel? So I said I needed to do a little research. So the first thing I did is I ordered all the books on Amazon that dealt with the topic. I got a little more interested, I started calling professors, emailing people, reaching out, really getting to know the subject. And as I'm reading these books, for example, I'll tell you one of the main regions we're getting emails from was Afghanistan. So I'm reading these books in Afghanistan, and the tribes in Afghanistan are basically named after the 10 tribes of Israel. They only marry within their tribes. You have the major clans are the Shinwari, the Rubaini, the Gadi, the Afridi, the Livani, and one of the major ones is the Yosef Zai. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Yosef Zai. It means children of Yosef. If anyone know who won the Nobel Peace Prize a few years ago, it was Malala Yousafzai. She was from the 10 tribes of Israel, who was on the front cover of Time magazine, who won the Nobel Peace Prize. The people who were able to put that together at the time were blown away, but most of the Jewish nation had no clue what was really going on. It was a mind-blowing thing. And it was a sign also. We'll go into other traditions and customs in Afghanistan shortly, because it is fascinating. So the first thing I did, when I was in yeshiva at the time, so I had deactivated my Facebook account because nothing good was coming from it. I said, I'm going back to Facebook, and I'm going to start searching these names of these tribal people and see if they're on Facebook. So I'm typing on Facebook, Yosef Zai, Rubaini, Gadi, and all of a sudden, 30-year-olds in Afghanistan are popping up. So I said, let me friend them and ask them. And so I'm sending a message and say, hey, is it true? Are you from the lost tribes of Israel? And each time, 100% of the time, they all said, yes, my grandparents told me that I am. And this wasn't like a few guys. I must have had a few hundred contacts over a few-month period where I was just building a network and going into it. Yeah, it's very heavy stuff. Sorry. So then all of a sudden I'm like, I'm learning about this, I'm creating contacts around the world, and I'm sending messages, they're messaging me, and I said there has to be something we could do about this to take it to the next level. And so what I did was I thought an idea and I pitched to a foundation, was called the iTribe, which is a digital non-for-profit. It's a social network, a map of the world, where people around the world who self-identify as being from the tribes of Israel can log themselves in and self-identify as being from the tribes. So what we did is we made it live, and all of a sudden regions started getting populated. And I want to discuss with you tonight the two major regions that are populating this website and the political implications of their presence in this Israelite narrative. If anyone has any questions, I also don't mind the hands being raised, because if there's a camera, I'll repeat the question. This is going to be a lot going. So what we did is we created this website, and when people started registering, they started uploading their information, their content, so we were learning about them as well. So, for example, in Afghanistan, the Pashtuns, that's what they're called, they've been living there for exactly about 2,600 years. That's where they date them. Just about 100 years, the tribes of Israel go into exile. The tribes went into Israel, the exile 722 before the Common Era. And then the Afghanistan people founded around the year 600 something in Afghanistan. And we know the tribes were exiled to the Far East. Now, besides just their names, they have a lot of other traditions, like they do circumcision on the 8th day, unlike other people around them. They eventually were forced converted to Islam, but they hold their own code called Pashtunwali, which is, if you Google Pashtunwali, you learn, it's basically the code of the law of Moses, which is the written law without the oral law softening it. Because by the time the tribes went into Israel, they didn't have a Mishnah or a Talmud, they didn't have the oral law, so they had these very harsh Israelite codes that they've kept. A lot of the tribes out there, they wear four-cornered garments with tassels, they have side locks, they all cover their heads. They're the only Muslim people that when they learn the Quran, they shuckle like this. These are known facts. Some people even light candles under baskets on Friday. So all these things. So we actually sent out a survey, a data poll to these regions, and we pulled from different regions of Afghanistan. We pulled a lot of data from them, asking them questions about their customs and traditions, aligning it with Israelite customs and traditions. And the evolution of that is we've created a Facebook group just for Jews and Pashtuns to start talking and sharing and dialoguing. So if anyone in this room wants to tonight have a conversation with the people of Afghanistan, they could just easily join this Facebook group and see what dialogue is going on between a few hundred Afghans and a few hundred Jews already as a result of this. So this was in Afghanistan. I'd like to go now into one other region, and then we'll swoop back into why this is all relevant. Because the biggest part of this whole thing is, if so, so what? So I'm telling you all this crazy stuff, so what are we going to do about it? What's the next step? The next biggest place in the world today and we'll talk about other minor places where you see the tribe surface, but the next biggest place in the world today is in Nigeria, where you have people claiming to be from the Israelites. This is Nigeria is not the proper name they would refer to it, but it's the Igbo tribe in Biafra, which was once Biafra. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of them or familiar with them. They number about 40 million people in the southern tip of Nigeria, and they also have a ton of customs and traditions that completely align with the Torah, and they have a few million practicing Igbo today, practicing Jews so if you go on Facebook, you'll see them uploading pictures of them praying with talit and tefillin, and they have Torahs, and they're very, very, very dedicated. Now, I'd like to go into one thing, before we go into other tribes, just what the political aspects of this whole thing are. Now, here's where it gets a little heavy. So now we're looking at this map, and you have Afghanistan, you have Israel, and you have Nigeria, and you're seeing these are the largest places in the world today that are identifying as the Jewish, or the people from Israel. The word Jewish is the wrong term. Why? What does the word Jewish mean? It means you're from Yehuda, from the Judean exile. The first time you really see it used is with Mordechai Nesser. We refer to Mordechai Ish Yemini. We refer to in the beginning of the Megillah, which means a man from Benjamin. But he's also referred to as Yehudi Ish. So he was from Benjamin, but they classified him as Yehuda because we say the tribes of Yehuda are compiled by Benjamin, Levi, and Judah. So this is why we call Jewish. So when we refer to these people in Afghanistan and Nigeria, someone says, are they Jewish? Can you count them in a minion? For now, we don't have to get religious, because this is a family. If you find that you have a long-lost cousin on the other side of the world, you didn't get in touch, the first thing you ask is, how many times a day are you praying? No, you say, are you okay? Do you have food? Do you have what you need? That's the first logical approach. So now that we have these tribes surfacing, that's the approach we're going to take as well. So now I want to say something really interesting, which most people don't notice. In Afghanistan, they're destabilized. They have, I don't know if the kind of people in this room are familiar with the politics of what happened there in the last 40, 50 years, but Afghanistan was once a little bit larger than it is now, and the British came in and drew a line, basically right down the middle of it, called the Durand Line. And there's Pashtuns living on both sides of this line, and it destabilized the region. A lot of them are in refugee camps, growing up very impoverished, and then you have Saudi funds coming in and radicalizing them into radical Islam. But the older tribal elders are very upset about this because they say, well, this is not our way of practicing. They call themselves Bani Israel. If you Google the words Bani Israel, only one people come up, that's them. That's what they refer to themselves. They say, this is not us. We need to be rebuilt up again. But right now we can't, because we've been thrown into this place called Pakistan, which is not our homeland, and we're not ruling over ourselves anymore, and we have no rights anymore. This happened, this line that they drew, which destabilized the whole entire region, happened within 3 or 4 months of the British coming to Israel and drawing the green line right up the middle here. Within 3 or 4 months. So all of a sudden, my brain works with the neurological pathways. I start making connections. I say, wait a minute, okay. I'm not going to touch Israel politics. One state, two state, we'll get to that. But I just see a bigger common denominator. That lines that have destabilized Israel have also destabilized the other people that claim to be from the 10 tribes of Israel during the same few months of each other. And then I looked into it even farther. Nigeria wasn't Nigeria. There was the Yoruba tribe in the north, and the south was called Biafra, which was Igbo land. Yes, and the British came in before I think earlier 1900s, but they came in and they drew a new line and said, this is now Nigeria. Biafra and Igbo, you are no longer autonomous over yourselves. Now other people are going to rule over, and also created chaos and war for them. In the 1960s, the Igbo tried to go independent. They tried to become an independent state again, and there was actually a genocide, a Holocaust. Most people don't talk about this Holocaust. There was an actual Holocaust against them where millions and millions of people were killed and starved. And I believe this is not a secret, but it's not publicly spoken about, that Israel was the one that came and broke that blockade against the Igbo. They came with their jets and they brought, I don't know the details of the military operation, but they were the ones who broke the blockade on them, that brought them food and et cetera, and helped save them. Now today, the Igbo are again trying to go independent. They are trying to become an independent nation again in Biafra, and it's a very strong movement, and it looks like it probably will happen. The leader of the Free Biafra movement today shows up to all his events. When he has to go to court for treason and stuff, he shows up with a talus on his head, a four-corner talus with strings. This is not, I'm not making this up. Everyone, I always appreciate, people go to Google and Google what I'm saying, because the internet's full of the information that you can cross-check and make sure this is not a hocus-pocus conspiracy theory. And so now we have a bigger scenario. I say 3 places that the British drew lines, that they destabilized, are all claiming to be from the people of Israel, and are now locking arms and creating a common voice between themselves. And there's power in that. So all of a sudden, when people come to me and they start talking about one state, 2 state solutions, I say you have the totally wrong context right now. You don't have no clue what's really going on in the bigger picture. Because it's not about Israel, 1 state, 2 state. It's about lines that third-party people came and drew and created instability. Now, I personally have no problem with Arabs or Muslims. I hang out with them all the time when I see them in the street. I feel, high-fiving, I have friends. That's not the issue. The people can get along. But when you put leaders with jobs who need high salaries in charge of lines that someone else drew, that's going to create a whole mechanism of instability. So what the future will look like, I'd like to start to begin to speak about that now, because this comes back to the if so, so what? If so what that you have 40 million people in Nigeria, 25 million people in Afghanistan.
Hold on, we're just going to pause the video here to talk for a second.
So yeah, this is some very interesting information. I want to. There's a lot of concepts and ideas that I want to get into. Some of them towards the end, but one of the ones we were talking about earlier is this idea of these artificial lines. Going back to the significance of this time period between, I'd say, the Crimean War till World War II. There's a significant, interesting evolution of history that happens. So going back to the Vilna Gaon, and this gentleman here is a direct descendant of the Vilna, of the Gra. We're just actually talking about this in our tour group the other night. But in according to Zohar, there's one date that will demarcate like this countdown. There's a countdown coming, and that year is 5600, which would be 1840 of our calendar. And so there was some of the I can't think of the right word. I had a hard time last night too. The leaders of the Vilna's community, the teacher, so basically the descendant of the Vilna, saying that understanding the writings, understanding the Zohar, understanding that this time frame that there's various windows of opportunity that open in history, and there was a very important and significant window of opportunity opening in 1840, and there's this idea of this the redemption will come, whether an active force through teshuva, tikkun, repentance, repair, and return back to Hashem and Torah to the Jews, or it'll be a passive from below, a passive force that comes. And part of this passive awakening is this time frame that things start to speed up very quickly. And almost like the due date, the last few weeks of pregnancy, that there's this time period where things are going to start happening. And 1840 was this time where this awakening from below was understood to begin. And this means that, we're going to move towards the Messianic age. But the way that these events come about will not be supernatural and painless. They're going to seem to come through, quote, natural means. When we talk about wisdom opening up from below, the sciences, the 7 pillars of science, mathematics, philosophy, all of these various disciplines are going to start taking great leaps forward. You can see, the movements in the late 1800s where, looking at the rights of the common workers, that there were people and, children's aid society, family aid societies, even animal aid societies start popping up all across Europe. There's a philosophical leap forward in care and compassion for our fellow human beings, creating, homes for orphanages, starting to take a look at societal problems and tackle them. And in science, that there is going to be a great, leap forward in knowledge and understanding about the cosmos, physics, medicine, all of these hallmarks that when you look at them, they can be supernatural. But in reality, the Vilna, he didn't have the language to describe it as eloquently as we do today, but it's kind of us looking like we're going to be living in the Star Trek universe where people are going to be fed, and there's going to be a measure of peace and safety, and there's going to be all of these elements of the Messianic kingdom which will start to develop in our world, but slowly and through a natural progression. And so in regards to this awakening below, there's a time frame where Hashem has said, Israel will return to the land. And in this 1840 time period, a part of the awakening below, one of the students of the Vilna, of his writings, said that we have about 100 years to start to populate the land, to retake back Eretz Israel, to reestablish a Jewish presence in the land, because that is going to happen. Jews are going to come back to the land, and a majority of the Jews are going to be in Eretz Israel, in the land of Israel, and not in the Galut. The diaspora, this exile, is going to come to an end. And how you want it to happen depends on becoming an active force, meaning actively settling the land, conquering and taking it, or being forced into the land through a passive force. And so we know in 100 years, you just fast forward 100 years from 1840, you get to 1940, and you can see that this process of Israel being established as the safe haven for Jews in the world comes about, but it comes through a terrible, horrible price for Jews. And for that terrible price, the world acknowledges for a brief moment in time that Israel has a right to that piece, that chunk of property. It's about the size of, not quite, it was much smaller then. And Jews have it for the first time in thousands of years, a recognized and established homeland. So you can see that these writings had great wisdom, that this time frame, that they're not saying they're prophetic. They're saying they're looking at various writings, various interpretations, understandings of scripture, and they're piecing this information together. Now, a fundamental aspect of this is Jews are not the entirety of the sons of Judah, these 12 tribes that comprise the descendants of Jacob. And we know that there's this history of these 10 lost tribes. So part of this ingathering into the land means that all of Israel will come back at some point. And it's always been it's been a shrouded process, a kind of a mystical understanding of part. We know, and there's a lot of writings that focus on the fact that, not just Jews, not just Judah coming into the land, but there's going to be awakening of these exiled remnants of Israel. They're going to wake up in the end of, in this time coming up to the period of Mashiach. There's going to be awakening, that they're still attached to Hashem, that when these 10 tribes go and they're lost to us, to the nations, through knowledge and memory, that the Shekhinah, this aspect of God, goes out into exile with them. And there's a really one of the hallmarks of Mashiach is that he's able to gather the lost sparks of the Shekhinah, to gather and to bring the Shekhinah, this portion of Hashem that goes out with the exiles, back into its fullness, bringing all of this back, gathering the Shekhinah back to her king, reuniting the king and the queen together, and that's one of the roles of Moshiach. And so part of that return means that the lost portion of the Shekhinah that is gone with these descendants of Jacob must be found and awakened again. And so this is a very important aspect of the redemption. And in fact, it was such an integral aspect of the redemption that the Vilna himself wrote a very long letter, the 10 Lost Tribes. And we'll put a link into the group there, right, Tovia? I can put a link to that in the Sephira, and it's available in English and you can read it. But the interesting thing is this connectivity is a very important thing, and when the awakening comes from below, then it's going to be veiled. It's going to be mistaken for a natural process and not necessarily the awakening of a messianic consciousness in the world. And so part of this, as Diana was saying, is a big part of this is this connectivity being reestablished. I've mentioned it before, but this idea that if you look at the advent of the internet coinciding with this knowledge, if you break up, so going back a little bit, rewinding here, if you take the hours in the Garden of Eden that Adam and Eve are there, they're connected to epochs of these 6,000 years that we have to endure until we get into the 7,000th year of the the age of Messiah, Messianic kingdom, Messianic age. So that the 6,000 year period is carved up into periods of time. And if you look at, like, at noon they were doing this, and at 1 o'clock they were doing that, looking at these as corresponding to periods of time, in night, roughly corresponding to the time that Adam and Eve partake of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, is about the time that you see the advent, correspondingly in our age, the advent of the internet. And it's very interesting. When you look at these rabbinic timelines, or these timelines of history is understood through, I would say, Torah time, is what I call it. You can see some very uncanny, I wouldn't even call them predictions. I would say revelations of knowledge. Like, my favorite is Rabbi Isaac of Akko, who will always be the one who has the correct age of the universe. And a time when, a time when what he was saying was heresy. He was calling the age of the universe billions of years old, and the age of the earth hundreds of millions of years old. So there is some deep wisdom here, and a big part of that is going to be this return of these 10 lost tribes. And how does this process happen? And this is why we focus on this guy here. He's pretty. He's got, anyway, I'll stop with my little diatribe. Any questions or comments? Anybody want to get some? Oh, wow. Well, the interesting thing to me, when I first, many years ago, the first inkling I got of these lost tribes, apart from the Falasha, or the Beta Israel, the Ethiopians that made it into Israel, were the Pashtun. It's a very interesting group. So let me continue. Don't be afraid to post any questions, or we're going to continue a little bit more. Yeah.
We'll claim this. And I'll tell you one other very interesting thing before I go further into this, is that there's they say, some people say higher numbers, I'm going to go conservative, about 30% of the Palestinians in Israel have Jewish blood. And yeah, they have Jewish blood. Not only that, the first prime ministers wrote about this of Israel, and the scary thing is a high percentage of terrorist attacks actually come from these people. So there's a few questions we could ask. How is that the case? And we say very clearly, first of all, we were taught when Israel became a state, a lot of these people reached out to rejoin the Jewish people and were denied. And this created a big resentment in them. And secondly, they're persecuted by other Muslims called fake Arabs. That, like, you're not really an Arab, like you're a Marrano, so to say. Like, it's a derogatory term. So psychologically, they don't fit in anywhere. So they're trying to fit in so hard in their Arab communities. They go to such extremes to do terrorist attacks here to show, no, look, we're not Jews, we hate Jews. Look, we're really you. And so it's psychologically damaging, and they need, there's got to be a therapy involved in that. So what happened was we started also mapping out villages in Israel, so we can now pinpoint which villages are from these people. Do we have contacts on the ground? Can we message them? Can we pull data from them? And there's a whole network. So now what's the future of this whole thing I'd like to go into? Some people in the room may know what I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to debrief. It was a mission about 50, 60 years ago in Israel. We have a question? Yes.
Is it possible theoretically to do genetic testing?
Genetic testing, first of all, has been done on the Palestinians and Jews, and we've already figured out we're extremely similar. Genetic testing is difficult, though, because we don't have the ancient Israelites mapped out today. For example, they say the Ashkenazim came from a few hundred families only, and when you look at the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, only a very small population of the people actually came back to the land. We're like a remnant of a remnant of a remnant of people. Most people today could trace back to to Rashi. We're a very small population. The Kohen gene and the Levi gene, that would be interesting. I don't know if we've done because we do have a Y chromosome for the Kohanim. If we would do that in the Palestinian villages, that would be very fascinating. That's a good question. So let me take a sip and we'll go forward. So the question is, if so what? So what do we do about all this stuff? There was a movement in Israel, I don't know the exact year, it started in the 1940s, was 1950s, and maybe it ended in the late 1950s. It was called Choma u'Migdal. You don't have to give me a nod if you know what I'm talking about, because I'll say what it is. It was called the Wall and Tower Movement. It was basically, they were trying to build cities in Israel in the north, young Jewish pioneers, and Arabs kept coming and burning down the cities, so they weren't able to build them. So what they did was they would show up to a plot of land with a prefabricated wall and a tower and teepees. And they would set up a base camp overnight with a wall, a tower, and teepees, a lot of them, and they would, for a few weeks, they start to build up. And we have about 50 or 60 major kibbutzim and moshavs in the north that are based off of this model, Choma u'Migdal. It was a very successful operation. So it was basically like a prefabricated pop-up community. Now the question is, what do we do about this going forward, and how does it have to do with that? So what I had, not me, but I have a team of people I work with, but our idea is to kind of say, let's do Choma u'Migdal 2.0, and go back to the main point. If you have these lost tribes around the world, the first thing we're doing is not to find out what religion they are, or convert them to Judaism, or try to get the right of return. Right now there are organizations in Israel who are doing amazing work, converting some of the lost tribes and bringing back to Israel. But the way I look at it, there could be a few 100 million people that have a claim of Zeri Yisrael, which is a real term in halacha. If you go to Wikipedia and type in Zeri Yisrael, it'll tell you it's a halachic status of someone who's a descendant of the people of Israel, but not from a Jewish mother, and they have a claim to be forced back into the people. You're actually obligated to convince it to come back in, as opposed to someone who just wants to convert. So they're not fully a non-Jew, they're not fully someone we're going to be in a minyan with yet. So we have this, this whole entire picture here, and so we say the first thing we're going to do is not give them religion. We have to give them sustenance and sustainability. Israel right now is leading the world in ecological technology and sustainable technology. All types of technology you could imagine, Israel's leading the world. So on our network, on the iTribe that we built, with each village there's going to be an option to click on each village and donate or sponsor to bring them a prefabricated pop-up sustainable city, basically, which means your electricity production, your water filtration, growing your food, etc. There's different types of products out there today that we could prefab all these things in like a little shipping container that you drop out of the sky, and next thing you know, you're giving them electricity, clean water, and life. And so this Choma u'Migdal thing, which built 60 communities in the north, I saw that as a prototype for something that can scale out to the future of these people. So now what I see is going to be happening. For example, if you look at the Bnei Menashe, the people of India who came back to Israel, they have their own militia and their own army, and they put the flag of Israel on the ground. They have their own Israeli army outfits with the Jewish star, and the same thing in Nigeria. They're declaring that this is Israel too. They're putting the flag in the ground. They're saying this is Israel. So now you have regions with large amounts of people, mass amounts of people calling themselves Israel, who are looking towards us, towards the Jews, to say, now what? What do we do now? We're looking at you. We want to be involved in this whole thing. And the Jewish people here, we're kind of arguing on our own mini issues without looking at the bigger picture, saying, hey, the big picture could save the little things that we're trying to nitpick about. So what I see the future going with this is certain borders that have been created by the British, which all over from here to Afghanistan are going to slowly reshift and reshape based on people's loyalty towards Israel. And I don't believe you're going to bring everyone from Afghanistan back to Israel. I believe you're going to bring Israel to Afghanistan. And I'm going to see this with a lot of places around the world. We'll get into that. So when we're saying this is about prophecy and geopolitics, the two are the same, because in the future we say the borders of Israel are going to spread. Now, is that through like tanks and airplanes, we're going to come conquer you? How's that going to happen? No. It's going to be people raising their hands and saying, we are from Israel, we want to be involved. And Rav Tzadok, I believe, Rav Tzadok HaKohen, a great sage, says, in the future, the world becomes Israel and Israel becomes Jerusalem. That's what he says. So when you speak about a global Israel, this is not a right-wing type of thing. This is a humanitarian thing, where this is a humanitarian mission. And once we get to world peace and all this stuff, then we can talk about religion. We can talk about the Afghans, what religion did you guys end up keeping after this time? We're going to go back into it, and etc. So this is really basically the main frame of this. I'd like to extend beyond Africa and Afghanistan towards the East and the West and speak about for a little bit other people that are going to be involved in this great gathering. Any questions in the meanwhile?
This isn't a question, it's a comment.
Please.
That as you possibly know, in the South Hebron Hills, there are a large number of so-called Arabs, in fact, who are of Jewish ancestry and still practicing Jewish customs. Especially, I think, in Khalkhul, and there are other communities like that. Their position with regard to Islam, I think, is very ambivalent. They're not really in and they're not really out.
Yes, this is correct. So for our maps and our data that we pulled, the majority of them are showing up around the South Hebron Hills. He's referring to the Arab, the word is not really Arab, there's no such thing as an Arab. There's Arabic-speaking people, because the Arabs are made up of total amount of different tribes and bands of people. So the real politically correct thing would say to the Arabic-speaking people, or people who subscribe to Islam, but if these people are direct descendants from their mothers of Jews, they're technically still Jews. There was a case in Majorca, outside of Spain. There was an island of Marranos that recently said who they were. They are all able to join the Jewish people without converting. Other people from the Marrano stuff, they couldn't prove their too much of the family tribe. They had to do a symbolic conversion. But this one whole island of people didn't have to convert, and they were living as Christians for hundreds of years. But they kept every family record intact because they took it that serious. So now let's go a little bit farther down the Silk Road. We're in Afghanistan. The interesting thing is, across the Silk Road, 3 major cultures and/or religions were formed within 100 years of the tribes going across to the Far East. This is the Pashtun, this is Buddhism, and this is Shintoism in Japan. All of them founded in the same exact years, all based on spiritual principles. So, one year people are offering their kids to the gods on the mountaintops to get rain, and all of a sudden the next year they're talking about nirvana and, reaching a state of mind called, we call in Hebrew, nachat ruach, clarity of the mind, etc. These are what their religions are based about. Now, the Shinto Empire, which is founded, within 100 or so years of the tribes going east, they claim, this is 70 million people in Japan in the Shinto culture, the oldest monarchy in the world, meaning the oldest line of kings in the world is the Japanese Shinto culture, dates back to the first king within 100 years of the tribes going to the Far East. They claim to be a chosen nation, exiled from a homeland, who reestablished the kingdom in Japan. They have a holy temple that they have, their grand temple, on Mount Moriah, on their mountain in Japan, where they have 3 chambers to their temple. An outer chamber where people come and celebrate, an inner chamber where priests do sacrifices, and an inner chamber where they keep an ark on 4 poles with these golden birds on them, and they keep 3 things in their ark. And they have a festival where they take the ark out and they dance with it and they hold it by the poles. All the priests in Japan around this temple, they wear, instead of squared, circle, phylactery-looking boxes, and they wear 4-cornered garments with tassels, and they blow these shofar horns every day. If anyone wants to go look at the Japanese alphabet, it looks nothing like Chinese or Mandarin or their neighbors. It very much resembles the Hebrew alphabet, on multiple layers, with many different examples. So these are just, we don't have a few hours to go into this, but I'm giving an overhead view of all this stuff. So the Japanese right now are also reaching out to the Jewish people and asking to be involved. I'll tell you a great little story runs right in here. It's a super story. So one time I'm on Twitter, trying to find Japanese people and talk to them, make all these relationships, and I found someone who was from the royal family, somewhat descended from the royal family, and he was really posting a lot of stuff about this. So I said, hey, let me connect to him and be friends with him. And he said he wants to come to Israel. I didn't know who he was really. He said he wants to come to Israel and take a tour. I said, I'll show you around, no problem. And he said, fine, I'll meet you in the airport. And he said, okay. This was a few weeks before. He said, what's the itinerary? What can we map out the days? And only did I learn after, the Japanese people are all very meticulous about itineraries. They like to know what they're doing very much in advance. It's not an insult to them, it's just the way they are. They're much better in life if I lived that way. So I said, that's not the way it always works in Israel. I said, you just kind of have to show up, and Israel has an agenda for you. We're going to just figure it out. And he said, okay, he came, he met me in the airport, a young Japanese guy my age. We became friends. Where were we going to sleep this night? Wasn't sure. We figured out, and it ended up working out. We stayed by this researcher's house, this rabbi. We made it around. Then it came time for Shabbos. It's Friday afternoon. He says, where do you want to go? I said, I don't have a clue. He says, okay. So we're walking around in the shuk here and there, and a friend calls me, says, hey, I'm going to my other friend's farm for Shabbos. You want to come? I said, perfect. So I said, we're going to a farm, So we're in the car, I'm driving up, and we're going into the West Bank. And he says, ooh, the West Bank, I heard about this place, it's a little scary. I said, don't worry about it. Then we're driving up, we go into a community called Itamar, which was just recently in the news at a time for a terrorist attack. And he got a little more, nervous. He said, okay, are we okay? And then, we're in a gated Itamar. Then we leave Itamar, and we're, super deep into the mountains over there on the front lines. And we end up at a beautiful community on a hill called Sheva Sheva Sheva. It doesn't have a name, it has a number to it. And there's, a few families there holding down space with their sheep, and they're really on the front lines. And we're sitting there, and I brought a lot of wine for Shabbat. I said, let's drink wine and enjoy. And they're sitting out there. And down in the valley, they have another tent with a few people trying, holding land and monitoring the sheep and monitoring the land. And Friday night, no one's drinking wine. I go, what's going on? No one's drinking wine. I'm trying to drink wine here. And then I realized at the end of the meal why. They start to divide night duty shifts for everyone at the table who's going to be on guard, because they live Sirius, And so I said, okay, So me and my Japanese friend, his name was Matsumoto, we get a 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. shift. I'm from New York City. I never really did a guard duty shift in my life. I made Aliyah already past the time of being accepted to the army. They wrote me a letter that I wasn't welcome, and so I didn't have any real formal training. So we wake up. He's got a knife in his hand, and I have a rock, and we're walking around just making sure everything's safe. Thank God we got really scared. There was one fox that scared the lights out of us, but otherwise we made it through the shift. We went back to bed. The next day during lunch, all of a sudden we hear they have walkie-talkies. We hear in the walkie-talkie someone's calling for code red backup, help. The guy in the tent down below is getting attacked by the Palestinian neighbors. And all of a sudden we start to hear gunshots in the background, and they go code red. And I saw, first of all, one of the most beautiful things in my life. A somewhat Jewish militia assembled within a minute or two from all the neighboring mountaintops, Jews on horses with swords and guns flying down mountaintops, and people on ATV. It was like a homemade thing. So just starts going to the front line. I have all these kids next to me playing around. The mothers are next to their kids with sniper rifles, looking around. The kids are playing. They didn't care. And all of a sudden, there's a fire that gets lit. The Palestinians lit a fire, and it starts coming towards the kids and the houses. It starts coming up the mountain very rapidly. So they started to go into the next level preparations. They have these shovels that you smack and put out the fire. So they hand everyone shovels, and they go. And the IDF eventually ends up coming, and they work together with the Jews in the region to help put out the fire. And so they give me and Matsumoto, my friend, they give us a thing and bottles of water to bring down to give to the firefighters to drink, because you can get dehydrated down there. And so my friend's wearing his Japanese robe and his Japanese slipper sandals. I don't know if anyone knows these traditional ones. And it's like a steep mountain to go. He was hopping down that thing like a ninja. I couldn't believe it. I'm uchiganowing. I'm trying to get down. He was trained for it. He's hopping down. Finally we get down. I see this Japanese guy's giving water to the soldiers. We ended up putting out the fire, and the day went by. And that was really the whole basic story. Shabbat went. So I come back to that community a few years later and to visit them again, and they say, we have to tell you something. Before that incident and after that incident, there was nothing like that ever happened. They said everyone here talks about the time that the guy from the Lost Tribes royal family in Japan came here and stirred up this whole entire energy in the region, and we're not gonna forget it. It was something very special. And so I said, okay, this is serious stuff, because that was the land of Yosef, that northern region. So who knows how many thousands of years before his bloodline may have been in this region, or someone from that family, and he invoked some type of serious energy aggression. Right. I have awesome stories like this, and we haven't really ever told them yet, so this is the first time really relating this. I'm happy you guys enjoyed it. Yes, you have a question?
No, it's not a question, it's
Please.
another comment. As you possibly know, in spite of the fact that the Japanese committed the most appalling atrocities against the Chinese,
Yes.
as regards the Jews, they were on the whole very liberal. And it's true in Shanghai, which was under Japanese control during the Second World War. It wasn't easy for the Jews, but it wasn't anything like what happened in Nazi Europe. And when the Nazis sent out a senior SS officer to try and persuade the Japanese to set up concentration camps, the Japanese refused.
That's interesting, yeah. You are right about some atrocities, and you're also right about they were very kind to Jews. I would like to just mention that the tribes of Israel, when they left Israel, they were called Ovdei Avodah Zarah. They were idol worshippers as well. And the tribes of Israel in the north weren't the most righteous people. They were, they separated from the holy temple. They were serving the golden calf in the north. There may have been murder and bloodshed. So we don't know. We had, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. We had these sages. We had Rabbi Akiva. We had great, great sages that kept us alive during the exile, who held on to the Torah. The Torah kept us alive. When the tribes of Israel scattered, they didn't have the light of the Torah that we had. There's different reasons why. There's different levels of exile. There was a spiritual exile and physical exile. We went into more of a physical exile. They went more into a spiritual exile because our light of the Torah has yet to diminish. Thank God. We could trace from today every single rabbi, that's what smicha, every single rabbi, all the way to Moses, we could trace every single generation, every single rabbi who is in this path, in this line. If there's one other group of humans today that could do that, believe you me, we would be the first people to study that line and read every work that they had to say and see how it matched up with ours. But so till date, we're the only people who have that known line. So we covered kind of the Silk Road, and that's where you find the Bnei Menashe. Also, people say, how'd they get out to northeast India? Well, if you look at the map, you have Afghanistan, and they're traveling. You have there right below China in the India region. You have Japan. You kind of see like a path that they traveled, and then cultural shifts that happen along those times. So as this global Israelite, let's call it the Commonwealth, starts to form, then you're going to start seeing these people are going to start surfacing and revealing the legends that their ancestors had told them. I'd like to go into one more big identity.
I'm going to pause here to bring up I'm sorry. So the Ramak, I think Cordovero, his teachings are, why are apart from Israel becoming whole, this shattered vessel of Israel being brought together and reformed into something new, something greater, which is keeping to the patterns that we've talked about many times before of the spiritual DNA of the universe. This is following that progression of how things develop in this world based upon the DNA of the spiritual essence that comprises our reality. One of the really important aspects of the return of the tribes, the reconstitution of Israel together, is a sign of comfort, and it's meant. And if you look, there's various places. There's one very explicit mention of this in Jeremiah chapter 31, and so I'll read a little bit from Jeremiah. It says, at that same time, says the Lord, I will be the God of all the families of Israel, and they shall be my people. Thus says the Lord, the people who survived the sword found grace in the wilderness, Israel, when I went to give him rest. The Lord has appeared of old to me, saying, yes, I have touched you with an everlasting love. Therefore, with loving kindness, I have drawn you, and again I will build you, and you shall be rebuilt, O Virgin of Israel. You shall again be adorned with your tambourines, and shall go forth in dances of those who rejoice. You shall plant your vines on the mountains of Shomron. The planters shall plant and eat them and as an ordinary food. For there shall be a day when the watchman will cry on Mount Ephraim, arise and let us go up to Zion, to the Lord our God. It says, sing with gladness for Jacob, and shout among the chief of the nations. Proclaim, give praise, and say, O Lord, save your people, the remnant of Israel. Behold, I will bring them from the north country, and I will gather them from the ends of the earth. Among them the blind and the lame, the woman with child, and the one who labors with child together. A great throng shall return there. They shall come with weeping, and with supplications I will lead them. I will cause them to walk by the rivers of waters, in a straight way in which they shall not stumble. For I am a father, and Ephraim is my firstborn. Hear the word of the Lord, O nations, and declare it in the isles afar off. Say, he who scattered Israel will gather him, and keep him as a shepherd does his flock. For the Lord has redeemed Jacob and ransomed him from the land of one stronger than he. Therefore they shall come and sing in the height of Zion, streaming to the goodness of the Lord, for the wheat and the new wine and the oil, for the young of the flock and the herd. Their souls shall be like a well-watered garden, and their sorrow shall be no more at all. And this is a really important idea of the Shekhinah, this lower aspect of God being ripped away and forced into exile with Israel. when they're scattered amongst the nations. And this is in 15, for 31:15. A voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted for her children because they are no more. Thus says the Lord, refrain your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for your work shall be rewarded, said the Lord, and they shall come back from the land of the enemy. There is hope in your future, says the Lord, that your children shall come back to their own border. So there's this idea that Rachel, the Shekhinah, is working to this is where you get into the Shir HaShirim, where, you know, the beloved, you know, the man and the wife, this unity, this desire to be together. When the Shekhinah is in exile, she longs to be with her beloved and will do anything to get back to her spouse, to her king. And so this is the I say, how do you say it? The magnet that will draw back Israel, no matter where they are, no matter where they've been scattered. And it's in this act of regathering, of awakening, is to be a sign in a time where there's going to be a lot of trouble, a lot of tribulation, a lot of suffering, a lot of agony. This sign, this awakening of this remnant, this lost aspect of Israel returning, is going to be a sign of great comfort. And that is in Isaiah, Yeshayahu 59, I believe. Let me check and see. No, sorry, 49. Yeah, sorry. So 49:14 says, but Zion said, the Lord has forsaken me, and my Lord has forgotten me. Can a woman forget her nursing child and not have compassion on the son of her womb? Surely they may forget, yet I will not forget you. See, I have inscribed you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are continually before me. Your sons shall make haste. Your destroyers and those who laid you waste shall go away from you. Lift up your eyes, look around and see. All these gather together and come to you. As I live, says the Lord, you shall surely clothe yourselves with them as an ornament and bind them on you as a bride does. For your waste and desolate places in the land of your destruction will even now be too small for the inhabitants, and those who swallowed you will be far away. The children you will have after you have lost the others will say again in your ears, this place is too small for me. Give me a place where I may dwell. Then you will say in your heart, who has begotten these for me, since I have lost my children and am desolate, a captive and wandering to and fro. And who has brought these up? There I was, left alone. But these, where were they? Thus says the Lord God, behold, I will lift my hand in an oath to the nations, and I will set my standard for the peoples. They shall bring your sons in their arms, and your daughters shall be carried on their shoulders. Kings shall be your foster fathers, and queens your nursing mothers. They shall bow down to you with their faces to the earth, and lick up the dust of your feet. And then you will know that I am the Lord, for they shall not be ashamed who wait for me. And so based on various passages, these two passages being primary, the Ramak talks about this supernatural sign in the midst of chaos and destruction is going to be a sign to bring emunah, to bring great faith, comfort, and energy to the Jewish people and strengthen them in a difficult time. So, okay, there's a question.
No.
Oh. Yeah. So I'm going to continue to play. Any questions that pop up, please don't hesitate to ask.
Anything which is going to involve politics in America. Excuse me. You have, now we mentioned you have the Igbo tribe. Has anyone ever been in Times Square or New York City where you have the African American Hebrew Israelites who stand on the street corners and yell at you saying, we're the real Jews, we're the real Hebrews, and you're a fake. Well, this is what they do. If anyone goes to New York, and almost in any city actually, there's people standing in corners yelling at Jews or yelling at white people saying that you are imposters, we are the real people of Israel. And so most Jews end up battling them, yelling at them, that you're this and that. So, I looked into it a little bit, and it turned out to me that a tremendous percentage of the transatlantic slave trade came from the Igbo tribe, the #1 tribe in Africa that claims to be Jews. made up a large percentage of the transatlantic slave trade. So there's no smoke without a fire. So now these people are claiming to be from the Israelites. This is not just a hocus pocus conspiracy theory that they're coming through. Their blood literally, and they're not even basing what they feel on the Igbo. They're not saying because we come from the Igbo, that's who we are. They're just saying this is who we are. We know it. We've looked at the prophecies, we've looked at the curses. This is who we are. We are them. And then so I come in, I'm trying to explain, and a lot of them do talk about this, but the general, this is not their connection. I say, hey, you have the Igbo tribe in Nigeria, you guys came from them, this whole thing. So one time I was in New York, I was in Israel actually, in Yeshiva Eish HaTorah, and I gave a lecture on called The Lost Tribes of Israel and the Purpose of Reality on YouTube. We're going to quantum physics and the sin of Adam and Eve and what the implications of that were and why that has to do with the lost tribes of Israel and why the tribes got lost, how they'll return, all that I covered in it. But in that lecture I spoke about the Igbo Nigeria and the African American transatlantic slave trade for about 4-something minutes. Someone took from that video, they cut that video, they clipped it, and they put it on their social media Facebook page. Within about a few days, combined between 2 or 3 different channels, it had about 1 million views within 2 or 3 days. So I was looking at the analytics of this. It was all African Americans viewing it. It was basically it. And they were all, some were commenting with words of endearment, some were words of hate. You know, this imposter Ashkenazi Jew who, you know, speaking about us. Finally, he's admitting, you know, who the real people of Israel were. So they're kind of taking my words out of context, but also, and so then I'm doing my thing, you know, I'm continuing to live my life. And I'm at Mishmar one night, you know, just singing and learning Torah. And I get a phone call, and it's these guys from New York, these Hebrew Israelites, that's what they call themselves. And they said, hey, Rabbi, we got a guy who wants to debate you, our greatest debater in the community. And he wants to debate you because he actually believes that the African Americans are the descendants of the Egyptian schools of mysticism, and that the Hebrew religion is ripped off of the African religion, and they want to go into a whole debate. And so the next thing I know, the whole entire thing stirred up, and I said, okay, you know, I'll debate you. I don't have a problem. Then the next day, I look at social media, and all over these flyers and videos about the big, great debate with the rabbi coming in from Israel to meet the guy. And I said, wow, this got out of control real quick. And, you know, my friends will tell me, you should not be doing this. It's in a big ballroom in Harlem. There's going to be thousands of people there. Yeah. And I said, look, I'm not going to back out. I gave my word I'm going to come, so what am I going to do? I said, I'm just going to walk right in there. And some of my friends wanted to come, bring popcorn like it was going to be a movie. And another one of my friends said, listen, you can't bring any Jews there. I'm sorry to tell you that. If you want to go, we're going to get you bodyguards, but no, the condition is no other Jews can go. I said, okay, you know, that's reasonable. It's a good trade. So I got a few bodyguards, which I don't know if I would have ended up needing it or not, but at the end of the day, I feel like it was good to have. And there was no other Jews there, and I'm in a big ballroom with, you know, 1,000 something, you know. Half the people hated me and were angry at me. A few of them loved me because I was verifying their story, and there's people looking to make peace and etc. And so basically I'm not going to have time to speak into this now, it's another lecture we'll get to, but I was able to go into a much deeper level of the mysticism of ancient Egypt and the mysticism of Israel, and showing how that school of mysticism existed way before the Egyptians. This is from the time of Adam through Noah and his children Shem and Ever, and showing how the people of Israel were free sourcing, basically opening up spirituality for the world, as opposed to Egypt kept it in a tier system where you had the God ruling over the man. And I kind of, you know, I really gave it to them hard, and I really put it into perspective. And from there was a great unity I felt between myself and these communities around America, which is a tremendous amount of them, they call Hebrew Israelites, of now practicing Hebrews, of the descendants of the transatlantic slave trade. And it's not just people, this is very high-profile celebrities and leaders who are taking this upon themselves and getting involved in this. So as far as America goes, what you're going to see is a tremendous resurfacing of a Jewish identity, but it's going to be a lot of work to see how we're going to come together and unify. Very, very interesting. I'd like to just deepen on that subject for a second. So there was 1960s, there was a community in America who took on this. This is already old. This is the early 1900s they started talking about this. They never stopped talking about this, because people who were getting beaten on these farms, these slave farms, were probably telling their grandchildren, hey, we're from the people of Israel. If you look at the names, first of all, they kept meticulous records, the slave ships. They kept great records of people's names and etc. Almost all the Igbo names had the word Yah in it, you know. And yeah, I looked at the list and I said, wow, this is crazy. They all had the word Yah in it, you know. And so when this is what they're telling the grandkids. In the 1960s, there was a community in Chicago who said, one of their leaders said, I had a vision. I'm taking my community of Israelites and we're getting out of here and we're going to Israel. And what they did was they packed up their bags. They got enough money to get plane tickets to Liberia. Because in Liberia, you get free, I believe you get free citizenship if you were descendants of the transatlantic slave trade. So they all pick up, they go to Liberia. And the leader of these people sold, he knew a good ice cream recipe. He made and sold enough ice cream to pay for everyone's ticket and the whole thing to Israel. And they just showed up in Israel, kind of unannounced, in Tel Aviv with the suitcase, said, we're here, we're home, we're the Israelites. And the government here was like, what's going on? And so they put them in these like temporary, really bad living conditions. I think it was outside of Tel Aviv in these really cramped old apartments, and they were living really poorly. But they built up. They grew a little bit, and they really thrived. And then they ended up networking. They're good at it. They struck a deal with the mayor down in the Negev by Dimona to get a big plot of land and to create their own village. So this was the 1960s. Early 1970s. So they ended up getting land, and they created what's called the Village of Peace right now. Or if you go on Waze, I think it's Kfar HaIvrim or Kihilat Ivrim, like the Village of Hebrews. And it takes you right to them. And they're actually one of the most beautiful communities I've ever seen in my entire life, as far as the whole entire community takes care of one another. There's no alcohol, there's no drugs, there's no poverty, they don't lock their doors, everyone's a vegan. They have their own birthing centers. I mean, maybe if you guys have beer on the side, I'm not judging.
There's polygamy.
Well, they serve in the army.
There's polygamy there.
Yes, there's polygamy. Hey, I'm not judging that. There's some of our greatest ancestors that we pray to every day. They practice polygamy also. So, like I said, people come from different regions, different customs. The Gezerah, the rule that there shouldn't be polygamy anymore, was placed on a certain segment of the people of Israel and not the whole. But I agree. I think Adam and Eve is a big, that like duality, the soul. So I hope we could return to the Adam and Eve scenario and rectify that. So as far as polygamy, first of all, they had a lot more women than guys. I don't know if they're polygamy, who they would marry at the time. I don't know if Ashkenazi Jews in yeshiva were going to send their bachrim down there to marry their girls. One day, I hope there will be a united nation.
Accepted Jews?
Huh?
Are they accepted Jews?
So politically, I don't believe they are. They consider themselves from the Hebrews.
Call themselves the Black Hebrews.
Yeah, that's the black. The word black is not because some of them, the Mishnah actually says in the Gaim, I think the second parak, first Mishnah, it says the people of Israel were not white, and it says they were not black, but it says they were boxwood. What boxwood is, I don't know. So some people in Nigeria look more boxwood than I look boxwood. I always explain how we got white. We don't know. It could have been King David, they say, was a redhead, and he had Moabite blood in him, maybe from Ruth and from Sodom and we don't know the genetics of the whole ancient people of Israel, how white snuck into it and which bloodline survived, and when Uncle is converted, was he white and are we the descendants of him? But the most important thing, the color doesn't matter. And I promise you the people of Dimona also would agree with me on that, because they invite me down there and treat me very kindly, as an equal, as a brother. And that's not, and there's a new generation being born. It always takes a generation to filter out and re-identify and then how they're going to move forward. And so what I see them as is a beautiful example of what the African American communities in America could look up to for what their future will be. Because right now the African American community in America is in a tremendous state of, I don't know if use the word impoverishment, but they still feel like they're in warfare, that they're being persecuted, attacked, and from all different levels and angles. Whether it's right or wrong, we can't judge them because they were taken from their homeland on ships and they have to start their life over and be equals to everyone else. And there's all this type of discrimination. So back to the main picture.
So I just want to pause here because there's some very interesting ideas that just came out in studies that they just did a study about, it's called epigenetics. So you have your DNA, but you also have, genes that are turned on and off throughout your lifetime. They're either expressed or they're muted. And so they found, going back, I'm going to say it was in one of the Scandinavian countries where they kept impeccable records. They found that if your grandparents or great-grandparents went through a period of starvation, then you had a higher likelihood of dying at a younger age, which is very interesting because these were coming in generations, subsequent generations that were well fed and didn't have any periods of famine. And that kind of turned scientists onto an idea of like, well, obviously your life experiences impact your DNA, and you pass these changes on to your children. And so one of the interesting things they did is phobias. They've looked at phobias, and can these phobias be passed on? And this is an important thing to have, because as our environments change and as circumstances change, our ability to adapt and react to that environment and pass that on to our children is an important characteristic to have. And we're obviously here because our ancestors were able to adapt to circumstances and environment and change accordingly. Some of that just is not just behaviors, but they found it actually is passed on in your DNA. So they took rats and they taught them to have a phobia of cherry blossom smell. And so when they had children, these little rat babies expressed a significant phobia to cherry blossoms without having any. That's not a normal rat trait. The idea is that you can have these traits, these if you have these powerful experiences, even in the physical world, it changes who you are, not just mentally, but it changes your descendants after you. And I really believe that some of these memories are laid down in our DNA, and we may not have a conscious recollection of why we have these phobias or why they occur, but they're there, and they're part of our life circumstances and the way that we experience the world. And I really believe that this powerful moment in history called the Revelation of Mount Sinai imprinted deeply into the genetic code of the people that were there, and that remains till today. So when this energy flows into the world, they have the ability, people that have this marker have the ability to respond, but now they're in the midst of a lot of confusion, a lot of error, a lot of misinformation, a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? No, there's a specific word I'm looking for. Not contamination. I feel like it's a thesaurus. I'm walking all around the word, but I can't find it. Corruption. A lot of the so they have a connection, they have a feeling, they have a sense, but they don't have the proper environment, knowledge, and consciousness to be able to understand these feelings that come from their very soul in a way that they can understand, and they don't have the context to interpret this energy correctly, and so they utilize their knowledge, their experiences, and all of these other aspects of their life to interpret this information. And that's part of the shaking that comes at the end of the Messianic age. Is this contaminated, corrupted consciousness is going to be stripped away and laid bare. Yeah, so that's just something I want to interject at this point. I think it's very interesting that he talks about there being a corporate experience that changes an entire group of people's experience and interpretation of the world.
And there's one other reason, back to the main picture, I'm painting for you little by little, because we can't cover this in 40 minutes. This really needs I actually have a course on this, an online course. I'll give you information at the end. It's losttribes.education, www.losttribes.education. We can go through a whole entire course on this and learn all about it. But in South America also, in Portugal, you have about 7 million plus people who are descendants of the Anusim, of the Moranos, from the Spanish Inquisition. So we've spread to 4 corners of the earth. It's official. It's already happened. So the question is, if so, so what? What do we do about it going forward? And what I'd like to present as my solution is this platform, the iTribe, where we're actually going to map everyone out, identify who's who, figure out what resources they need, and deliver them directly to those people without middleman organizations. Because right now there's a lot of middlemen between everyone in this room and the lost tribes of Israel. Think about it. If someone said to you, we have the B'nai Menashe return to Israel, it's really cool. If I said to anyone in this room, can you point to a map and show me where their village was? Or do you have one person in that village you could talk to and ask a question? I don't think anyone could say yes. Maybe you could say Mizra and Manipur. Can you show me their village? We don't know. So what's going on? How come we can't, let's open source this. Where are the people? How can we talk to them? How can we message them? How do I find out what they need? It's not enough to make one person or one organization standing in between these hundreds of millions of people and us here in the homeland who have all the resources. We have wealth and we have technology. Now it's on us to learn about this and activate this thing we call the Israelite Commonwealth. And just to end, because I know time, because we did end up getting land, thank God, was directly somewhat related to the beer company that we founded. It's a whole story that we'll need another hour for how it happened, but literally that vessel that we created, because we created that beer company, that was directly responsible for leading to the series of events that ended up getting us a huge chunk of land in the north, in the lower Galil. Actually, coincidentally, in the same exact location that Choma Migdal, the Wall and Tower Foundation, started from. And to get a little creepy, because it sounds already like too much, the name of my non-for-profit for this social network, the iTribe, which we created before we knew where we'd get land, is called Choma Migdal, before we knew anything, yeah. So this is my life calling. We're going to try to do 2.0 and scale Israel to the world. And everyone here is definitely invited to come visit us up north on our land, and I hope to, at the end, to collect everyone's email addresses and to follow up. And if you'd like to learn more about this, you can go to the website, www.losttribes.education. And I'd like to just take a minute before I wrap it up, if anyone has any questions. I know a few people asked their questions, but you may have got it out. Is the heavy stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
You made mention that some of the Palestinians have Jewish blood. There's a Jewish bloodline, the Christians as well. How about there's so many Muslims in the world, and when Muhammad went into villages, people also either killed them or they were converted. So is there any kind of research that was done that identifies that a certain percentage of the Muslims in the world, or even the Christians in the world, could really have Jewish backgrounds?
Right. So right now, the only thing we have is people self-testifying. And your question was, we're talking about the hidden Palestinian Muslim Jews that are Arabs now in Israel. How many people of the Muslim population around the world were once another religion, maybe Jewish, before they were forced to convert by the Muslim Crusades? And the answer is really all we have now. We don't want to be speculators and say, hey, you guys look like the lost tribes. We want to say who is saying they are the lost tribes, right? Who's coming out and saying it? So besides Afghanistan and the Muslims of Kashmir, you don't really have such large groups of people saying that, except I did once hear that the family of the Saudi family, a lot of people there were once Jews, not from the lost tribes. And Yemen, I also heard that there was a lot of the Muslim families of Yemen were once Jews. But that's speculation. Yes?
There's other factors also
Please.
involved. For instance, when you put so much emphasis on Afghanistan, history has showed us that a lot of the Jews in Mashhad in Iran were forced conversions or had to practice Judaism secretly, and a lot of them moved to Afghanistan.
Definitely.
So we see a lot of the artifacts that they used, it wasn't lost tribe, but it was the tradition just moving from one city to another city, or one country to another area.
This is a great question. I come from Queens, New York, in a neighborhood that hosted the only Afghan Orthodox Jewish synagogue in America. And I would pray there regularly. It was just a coincidence that I was down the block from them. And when I started learning about this lost tribe stuff, I spoke to them about it, and they said, yes, 100%. We knew about our Pashtun lost tribes neighbors. They were so nice to us, and we had trades, and they called each other, brothers from the same family. And so actually one day I brought from the Voice of Afghanistan TV station, I brought reporters to that synagogue, and they interviewed them, and they had a whole dialogue that they're coming back together, and they broadcasted it on cable TV in Afghanistan, showing, look, our Jewish brothers from Afghanistan didn't forget us. They're still, so there was a separation between who the Jews were and who the 10 tribes were in Afghanistan all throughout the whole time. And even with the Afghans, they had the 10 tribes, and the royal family of Afghanistan, which ruled for a long time, was not from the 10 tribes, they were the family of Benjamin. And the 10 tribes wanted them to rule over them because their rulers claimed descent from Melech Shaul, from King Saul. And so I'm actually friends with some of the descendants of the royal family. They're in exile in America right now, very vocal about who they are. And there was a whole coup with American politics, and the royal family was, they had to flee. So there is, like you said, there's going to be more information to be clarified on that. That's a good question. Yeah.
Great presentation. I'm philosophically and ideologically with you. But I wanted to present a challenge and a question.
Please.
In Sanhedrin 110b, Rabbi Akiva says, just as the day has disappeared and shall not return, so the lost 10 tribes have disappeared and shall not return. That's question one. How would you address Rabbi Akiva if you were sitting in the room? The second question is, if you had $20 million, and hypothetically, you could help a Kohen who was tricked by a lost tribe in China and lost $1 million, or people that are very far away from Judaism, who would you give that first $200,000 to?
So you're saying there's a halachic question about helping a Jew before helping someone who's a non-Jew. That's really your question over there.
Yeah, the first.
I would say that the people I'm referring to have a status of Zera Yisrael, which is a different halachic status than a non-Jew. So we'd have to ask a posek, but it's a good question. To answer your first question, which I'm glad you asked, because I've actually thought about this, and I've never really said this publicly before. It's not so fair, because you didn't say the second opinion of the Mishnah. He was saying there's a Mishnah that has an opinion. Rabbi Akiva says the 10 tribes of Israel don't return. Just like the sun, it says the sunset, they don't, that's it, they're gone. But I think it was Rabbi Eliezer, right, who says they do return. Most of the time we hold like Rabbi Akiva when it comes to these things.
There's a third of Rabbi Shimon said only if they do tshuva, according to...
Okay, it's interesting. I want to suggest...
Quick question, is that saying returning to here, like the land, or is that returning to the fold?
Ooh. So here I'm saying...
If they're setting up shop and staying locally and saying this is now part of Israel...
So according to the opinion that they return to their religion and their faith. According to the opinion that they don't return, they're not returning geographically, but they're staying where they were. And that's the context that each one was speaking in. This is a teretz that I thought of, an answer that I thought of a year or two ago that I don't know if it's the right or wrong, but according to Gemara logic, it could work. Yeah,
It works out because Rabbi Akiva basically said, well, the question was, how can Rabbi Akiva say such a thing if the prophecy says they're coming back? And he says, because they already did return.
Right.
So those few that returned with Jeremiah, whereas the rest will be in your category.
There's also one verse, which is an amazing verse. I don't have it offhand right now, but I could, if everyone wants to follow up with me. It says where the lost tribes were, I think, Chabor and these regions, which are, we could say in Afghanistan. The end of the verse says, until this day. So it says these tribes were exiled until this day. Now we all know in this room what until this day means in the Torah. I mean, still today, Hayom. It says still they are there. So we don't know if they're going to leave. This could be that somewhere they stay and the global Israel. I want to be able to take a high-speed train to Kabul for a business meeting and back in the same day to tuck my kids in. I don't think that's far-fetched. You had a question? Or you're just stretching? No peer pressure. Yeah.
Two questions. Are you in touch with Tzvi Sinai about the Jewish roots of Palestinians? The second question is, you outlined an amazing vision, which is different than the current political visions. Are you in touch with the Foreign Ministry and the Sochnut, for example? What is their take?
So I have been in touch with Tzvi Sinai. I tried to reach out to every single professor in the whole industry to learn
He's
about.
not a professor.
Yeah, he self-identified. He became.
He's a researcher.
Anyone who does research and does what he did, read a few books, I'll give him kavod and throw the name out there. But I guess you're right. I don't know who gets what degrees. And he basically wrote a book saying brother shall not lift sword against brother, which was about all the Jewish families and clans in Israel who identify, the Muslim ones who identify as Jews, their history, where they were. And actually, I looked at my map. His theory is right. A lot of them create this line down the middle on the mountains, and it shows after a long time they fled to the mountaintops. It was actually interesting also in the Tanakh, there's a verse that says, not all of the people were exiled from the land. There was a remnant that stayed to be the caretakers of the vines and the grape caretakers. Now, one of the main families in the village of Yatta, which obviously we've had terrorists come through, is I think the Mahmora clan, which means winemakers. What Muslim is going to be the winemaker family? It's haram, it's forbidden for Muslims to drink wine. So who were you when you were the winemaker? When was that? And they are the ones who identify. They're the ones under their floorboards, have old books with Hebrew in it, have slots in their doors for mezuzot, Jewish stars, etc. So and the second thing is regarding the foreign ministry, etc. What I do is still very low-key. It's not really out there known to the world yet. It's still a lot of work and infrastructure, but there has been interest from certain periphery people attached to certain ministries to learn about this, because Israel does have a Ministry of Diaspora branch that they haven't had so much success with, and they're still looking to see what's the next phase of keeping outreach with the people around the world who have this identity. So I have very serious political aspirations. I would like to take this to a very high political level where there's rulers and leaders from different nations congregating in Israel, themed to creating a global Israel. Putting all, no games. This is Israel today is one. First of all, the biggest blessing in the world. The fact that we have Jewish people protecting us, in our own homeland. It makes me emotional every day. I can't even tell you how grateful I am for it. But where we are now has still not embraced the identity of being a prophetic people, of what has to happen in order to usher in an era of world peace. That's like a foreign concept to our identity. You don't open the newspaper every day and read, how are we getting closer to these prophecies, X, Y, Z. So I'd like to help bring that back to the fold. One sec. Yeah. I just got to you, so I'll go to you. Yeah.
I don't know how deep your research is. I'd be interested to know, the breadth of it. But I'll give two suggestions, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
One is linguistics.
Mm-hmm.
There's linguistic professors who talk in written books about people and movement and areas, all based on linguistics.
Right.
One's a Bar-Ilan professor, Bernard Spolsky, who's written more books than anybody else. And
there was a book, I read a few books by a professor, I think it was Joseph Edelberg, about the Japanese language and the Hebrew language and how it passed from Israel to Japan and what evolutions it went through and etc. But I agree with you. Definitely more research needs to go in. I'm a young guy, and I feel like I'm a humanitarian servant. So I don't necessarily have all the time in the world. Yeah, I don't have all the time in the world to do all the research, but I'm like, hey, there's humans out here who are reaching out to us, who are saying this is who they are, and they're in code red, so we got to act.
And there's a couple guys here in Jerusalem who have gone off to all the different tribes in Africa trying to find a Masoret to see about kosher animals.
Definitely.
Now, they also were looking at lost tribes or remnants of tribes.
There's another tribe in Africa, I believe there's called the Lemba tribe. It's in South Africa, and when Israel became a state, they wrote a letter to Israel asking for the right of return, and everyone kind of laughed at them. You're trying to jump on the bandwagon, first world country, third world country. Everyone kind of laughed at them. A professor from Duke went down there and did DNA research and showed 10% of this tribe had the Kohen gene. 10% of them were Kohanim. This is also not a secret. I really encourage everyone to research this when they get home. And so, yeah, these places in Africa do exist, these Masoras, and there are independent people doing different things, which is why I was trying to create an umbrella so that could all be organized content.
And one last point.
Please.
When people did move, for instance, the exiled from Spain to Holland, from Holland they went to like Suriname and New Guinea and Papua New Guinea, they would call their areas on Jewish names. They called it Jewish Savannah, or they called the area the Carmel or the Golan. So sometimes the names came from abroad trying to replicate rather than from inside reaching out.
That makes total sense. You see, I think there's in the Saudi desert, there's something Al-Yahud, like the desert Al-Yahud, where the Jewish desert was. So I definitely think we name names. They say Kandahar, even, where in Afghanistan is, where there's big mountains, or they say Kandahar, here is the mountain, in Aramaic, Kandahar. So a lot of the names can get assessed like that. That's why the prophecy says you'll find the lost tribes by the river Chabor, and they say by Khyber, that's where they all are today. Khyber, Chabor. People align all these things, but I'm at the point where we have enough information in front of us to make movements and not sit here and say it's cool or to speculate on and be like, wow, so exciting. What are we going to do about it now? We have to, as a generation, as a nation, do something. Yeah.
Tachlis, what would you like to do in the next 10 years?
What would I like
in
to
what
do?
Steps? Tachlis.
I would like, so my model is right now.
Your business model,
yeah.
let's say for this.
I have an online course on this Lost Tribes of Israel, which is college accredited. I have college accreditation, that's my business. So it means people could receive 3 college credits for learning about everything we just spoke about tonight, and they pay for it because it's college credits, it has a value. And with money I make, obviously I'd like to take care of my family, but I would like to be creating a funnel to give back into mapping out to the non-for-profit side. I would like within the next 10 years to make capital there and map out every single place in the world where you have the tribes of Israel, have community and content managers, basically create the Facebook for the lost tribes of Israel, where we're going to scale Israel that way. I'd like to see a global Israel with world peace. You can call me a dreamer, but I think every single human in this room should have their own map or vision that they think they should contribute to get to that goal. I've created mine, and I'm humbly going to try for it. If I don't succeed, I'm going to enjoy the ride. I have good friends, but this is what I'd like to do in the next.
What do you see after the 10 years, let's say, whatever it is, after you have a map?
Well, now you're talking about the Geula. I hope that the Geula comes. In the time of the redemption, we say the practical difference between the redemption and the non-redemption is the yoke of the nations are off of our shoulders. So this is basically what we're trying to do. We're trying to get all the middlemen out of our lives, which includes, things like we would have had 100 years ago had Nikola Tesla gave us the free wireless electricity, and we didn't have middlemen or organizations making calls and for-profit companies and wars over. This was an example of nations on our shoulders. There's middlemen between us and our resources, and that tax us and work us, and we're in their system. If we could free ourselves from there, we can grow in spirituality. I know that there's a lot of dormant parts of the mind right now, and a lot of new methods out there are helping people, re-embrace who they are. What they call mindfulness or whatever it is, people have today what we called in Egypt, katzar ruach, a shortness of breath, where people really have no clue who they are. They live day to day just trying to make it to the end of the day. They're very stressed. We're not healthy as far as humans go. We're healthy as far as our riches, our physicality, but our mental state as humanity today is very poor. So I hope that will increase, and this would be maybe the time of the redemption. Now we say that the redemption has to come, right? We all know that by the year 6000, according to the timeline, every day of creation is 1,000 years to come. And so we're 233 years away, 223 years away. I'm not good at math so much. And from this time, and we believe there's also, just like the Jewish people make an early Shabbat, the great redemption will come in early. So 10 years from now, I think there's already Yoter Midai. It's way too much. I'm optimistic. I think this whole thing could wrap up within a year if we're strategic about it. People, I forgot, it was a video in, I think in 2012 or something. It was called Coney 2012. I don't know if anyone remembers it. It was about this African tyrant in Africa, and he was killing people, and some people had an idea how to save the village, and they made a video and a campaign and a call to action, and it got like 70 million views in like a day or two. Guy raised a ton of money, and supposedly the creator of this project snapped. It got too much for him. He lost his mind, and he went insane, like to an insane asylum. But I said, wait a minute. I said, some young guy in California can have an idea to help save a village in Africa, could raise, can get all these millions of dollars, 70 million people to view it in a day or two. I said, the redemption can come in a matter of days. It just depends how we package it and present it. And this, we need divine providence and the right team. But this is why I'm coming out here speaking to you guys tonight, and we're going to keep the voice alive for it. Yeah?
You spoke mostly about a group of people that moving to Israel, and they identify as Jews and or have Jewish habits. You think that the trend of maybe single people that want to convert and return to Israel, but they don't have, they are not born in a Jewish environment, but maybe have Jewish roots. You think that these two trends can be is the same trend, or are two different?
No, the people who are converting to Jewish roots are, I think, a different category. First of all, we say a convert is not a convert. His soul was at Mount Sinai. Once they convert, we say their soul was at Mount Sinai. They're simply rejoining. But that's how I think we officially believe that's the case. I think if someone wants to convert and move to Israel, no one should stop them and get in their way. If someone from Nigeria or someone from Afghanistan wants to convert and learn the mitzvah and do everything, and he wants to move to Israel, who could stand in his way? But what I'm saying is we are not going to try to convert them, and we're not going to try to bring them to Israel. But it's not in our hands to stop people from seeing the beauty of the Torah and wanting to take it upon themselves. So if you know someone on that journey, you tell them to keep going strong and make it to the homeland. That's the whole thing. Yeah?
I agree with another point you made really strongly about, for example, Palestinians that are turned away and wanted to appeal to become part of the nation, and they were turned away parallel to Timnah coming to Avraham Avinu and wanting to join, and giving rise to Amalek. Maybe Abraham would maybe go back and do that day over. But you mentioned therapy. Are there particular models of therapy that you've looked at and you consulted with people that understand the process of getting from a person from maybe acting out with anger to integrating and grieving and being able to because it's a system. It's a persistent that's
I
perpetuated.
mean, you had to go there. You're just pushing my buttons. You asked if we're talking about the Palestinians who were once Jewish and they want to reconvert and the terrorism and the whole thing. I like what you said about the connection with when Avram was reapproached by, her name was referred to as Timna at the time, right?
Yes.
To join back, and she was denied. It created Amalek, this nation that hated the Jews. Are we in a similar situation today where these Palestinians tried to rejoin and we weren't allowing them in 1948, and now they hate us, but they're still now we could rejoin with them, but they need therapy. So what would be the ideal therapy? And listen, this is where it can get a little controversial because I have my own ideas. I don't know if it'll scale, but what I'm about to say right now is definitely backed by a few Gedolim of Israel already who signed off letters on this. This is not my opinion, but what I've seen already work, in articles and etc. What they would need, I would say, is called a neurological reset. People have traumas in the neurological pathways. For example, if there's a dog who bites someone when they're 4 years old, and now they're 14 years old and the dog barks, they're going to have a neurological stimulation for fear. So there is, I'll be specific about the names, there are certain plant medicines out there that actually people can take and within a day reset their neurological pathways and heal them from any pre-existing traumas, to kind of give someone a fresh start. The name of this medicine, which is practiced in the South America, would be called ayahuasca. You see many celebrities, high-profile. Ibogaine is a medicine used to reset the neurological pathways for people with a heroin and opiate addiction. Yeah, mostly it is used for heroin. So if someone had a bad trauma, we would recommend he does a plant therapy called ayahuasca before ibogaine. If someone's overdosing, and first of all, if anyone knows about opiates or heroin, it's almost impossible to get off that without withdrawal symptoms. Like you mentioned, there's a plant called iboga, which comes from the Gibon region of Africa. If you take that, same day you can walk away without clean from heroin, without any withdrawal symptoms, etc. And this is not new. There's Gedolim in Israel who signed off letters on this, calling it Techiyas Amesim. The Jewish community has been very supportive of this secretly for many years already. Thank God I never had to know about it, but this is real. So this plant ayahuasca, which we can't get into too much because of the time constraint, certain chemicals involved in it have to do. Actually, I'll tell you very quickly. Maybe you don't know this. We were talking about therapy, so I recommend ayahuasca for the Palestinians. I think it's probably the coolest idea in the world. I don't know if I'll be received well or not for it, but I have no problem standing my ground and debating about it. The main chemical of ayahuasca could be extracted from atzei shitim, from acacia wood, which is what the Israelites planted when they got to Egypt and stared at throughout their whole, the Rashi says they stared at it throughout their slavery in Egypt, and because of staring at it, they had faith that there'd be the redemption. And they cut down the trees and took it into the midbar with them. So the main plant of the people of Israel is used around the world for these religious ceremonies, which basically flushes all of your neurological traumas in a matter of hours and lets you walk away a clean new person. So that's a new suggestion to the peace plan right there. If anyone argues with you about two-state, one-state, you could send them to me.
It has a ton of sheeting wood he's storing up.
What?
I know somebody that's storing up a ton of sheeting wood harvested.
Hey, listen, you tell him to apply for the government for an approval to be a healing center. The guy would be a cutting edge.
If it's possible to do a neurological reset in a few hours, let's say, why do people go to psychiatrists?
Why do people go to psychologists if you could do a neurological reset?
No, why do they keep
I'll tell you
going
very
there
clearly.
if they could drink something and get...
One of the biggest lobbyists in America is Big Pharma. Saying stuff like that could actually get me killed. It's very dangerous. But Big Pharma is I believe today it could be the #1 lobbyist in America, where pills is big business. So psychologists are pushing things for people who get paid. When you have doctors get people come into their offices and giving them gifts and payoffs. Yeah.
It's not just medicine that they give, but therapy, which takes 2, 3, 4 years, and it's a process. It doesn't have to guarantee any results.
There is no therapy today without the pills. In America, almost everyone is on an anxiety pill, an antidepressant pill, because it comes from their therapist. So it starts with a therapy session, then the therapist recommends these pills so you can cope with reality. But really, these pills numb you and take you away, and then get you addicted. You can't get off the pills, and they have side effects. And somewhere someone's making a couple $1 billion off of this. So we're stuck in.
It's not like that. It's not.
Oh, this is not a recreational thing. Most people who take it have no desire to ever do it again. This is
sounds like something almost everybody can take, because most people have trauma, and everybody.
Now you're thinking. That's great. Yeah, you're a genius. I would love if I'd love for the world to be normal, but that could be a conversation one day. When the Israeli government opens up, because celebrities in America are flying to South America to do it now, to just reset themselves from their drug addictions, from alcohol addictions. If Israel opened up one, how many people spend hundreds of millions of dollars in tourism to come here and stick their foot in the Dead Sea just to get a little healing? Imagine if we could heal all your mental illness. The whole world's gone insane with mental illness. Imagine if we could help with that. This is part of Israel being a light onto people. And also the Vilna Gaon says, in the future, the spirituality and the physicality merge into one. So when you start to see certain plants, and we don't have time to go into it now, but certain parts of the brain that get activated by it and have connected to with Kabbalah, there's like, I can give a whole shiur on what's going on with that.
On the note of plants, where do you find the most usage of gods? Yemenites, Ethiopians, Afghanis, and a little bit in Saudi Arabia, maybe?
Right, that's an interesting point that a lot of the tribes in Eastern Asia and Africa who are from the Jewish people chew gat to stay awake. It's a stimulant. So, for example...
but it's not something harsh. It's not something
no, when I was in America, I was in college. What the culture in college was? The culture in college was Adderall culture, which means every college kid, thank God I didn't need it. You see, I'm an energetic person. I didn't need that to focus. But every single college kid almost takes these pills called Adderall so they could stay awake in class and do their homework and take their tests. So I said, okay, I see that your body has a need for some type of stimulant to do that. I say, our brothers and cousins in Africa have this plant that they chew, which really doesn't have a withdrawal or side effects or anything that's natural. Whether it's healthy or not, I don't know. But I see you're being fed a for-profit product made in a laboratory by a company that's benefiting off this. We got to figure that out and got to stop. Why America makes tobacco and alcohol legal, but not that, something like that. This is part of a corruption that's going to unfold. They say with this generation, when we look back at it, they'll say the biggest issue of this generation was the for-profit companies who had a say in how humans medicated and took care of themselves. There should be zero for-profit interest in these industries of mindfulness and health. So this is part of my political platform. Thank you, guys. Any other questions? Wait, last one, and then we'll do a round. Okay, we can do a round. I'll ask you after. Okay, we'll get the question. What's the question?
I built a lot of momentum here tonight and found some support, and you mentioned about keeping things rolling. Maybe just say how good ways to keep it rolling,
right.
or a source sheet maybe for the websites you mentioned. So
First of all, on a personal note, I would like everyone before we leave if you could write down your email in the back so I could just stay in touch with you and send updates.
So I want to say thank you, everyone. Oh, a second. There we go. I just want to say something about the amazing substance called N-dimethyltryptamine, which is DMT. It is in every living creature on the planet, from plants to people. And there's people that call it the spirit molecule. The interesting thing about ayahuasca is one of the highest natural sources of DMT in the plant world is through the acacia wood. And the other interesting thing is that when you absorb DMT orally, you have to have a MAO inhibitor to absorb that through the GI tract. So in South America, they have these, they've been able to find plants that are natural MAO inhibitors and high sources of DMT and mix them together in a drink. Now, the unfortunate thing is with these drinks that comes high alkaloids, which is very caustic to the human GI tract. So with ayahuasca, usually comes a lot of vomiting and some diarrhea. There are pharmaceutical companies that had taken DMT and purified it, and there were clinical trials, to see the effects of DMT on individuals who had a history of using psychoactive substances in the past. Specifically, most of them had used LSD. And they had very, very profound experiences. And interestingly, they did these experiments under a functional MRI, which looks at the brain waves, the patterns, and not the brain waves, but looks at the areas of the brain that are active and awake, and what parts of the brain are functioning and which parts are not so active. And they found that even though people had these very profound experiences, that regions of the brain usually associated with imagery and visualization that would come about through LSD or mescaline or other these other substances, I've actually, these areas of the brain were quite quiet, and they were very surprised. And DMT as a treatment for addiction and depression has amazingly high success rates. That in some studies, 75% of the people who use DMT and this was done in more like a shamanistic setting with the ayahuasca. Some of these studies show that there's a 75% of the people that have this experience go on to never use again or have a relapse. So DMT is a pretty profound substance, and one of my favorite teachers, well, he's very knowledgeable. He has an interesting way of teaching. He was a great student of the Vilna Gaon, would be Rabbi Joel Baxt. He has a lot to say about DMT as well. I know it kind of devolved from a talk about the 10 tribes into a pharmaceutical diatribe, but I really kept it going because I thought that was a very interesting end. So I just, wanted to say that there's a very important aspect of this Messianic age that doesn't get exposed very much, and this is this 10 lost tribe, the ingathering of not just the Jewish exiles from the Galut of Esau, but the lost tribes that have been scattered and they've forgotten their identity. It's not, as he said, just merely a physical exile. It's a spiritual exile, meaning that they've lost conscious connection to who they are and where their origins stem from. And herald of the end, like these are the footsteps of the Messiah approaching, and we can hear them, are these 10 lost tribes awakening to who they are and coming back in some form, either physically to the land or reconnecting to Torah and Hashem. And I talked about earlier I talked about the Crimean War and the accident of history forming some very arbitrary patterns. If you look in the Crimean War, at the end of that came a pact, a mutual assurance of protection pact that basically, with the rising tensions in Europe and the assassination of a particular Archduke Ferdinand, came this cascading effect of World War I. And so one of the disciples of the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, who wrote a treatise known as the Lashem, and he is known as the Lashem after his work, understood that he was getting near a period of time. He knew that, the Vilna Gaon said, 1840 is going to be a paramount, and, subsequent rabbis said that we have about 100 years. So he knew that 1940 was a very important period of human history. And he was born, I believe, in the 1870s. And he wrote a commentary on the Vilna Gaon's work because he saw this period of time fast approaching, and he wanted people to understand the importance of the time that they lived in. And he lived through World War I, and he, through the teachings of various rabbis, was able to say, this is definitely the first war of Gog and Magog. And he said that there will be 3 wars of Gog and Magog, and he predicted with almost uncanny to the year accuracy the Second World War. He died before that happened, but he was able to say that the Second World War is coming, and there's going to be a 3rd war of Gog and Magog. And remember, these wars of Gog and Magog are paramount to the rectification that comes to the end, that ushers in the awakening of Messianic consciousness from below as part of the pains of the Messianic kingdom being brought in through natural means, in quotes. And there's a couple of teachings from Rabbi Anava that really highlight some of these ideas. And he cites a lot of source texts that I don't have access to, but I will try to find his teachings on these ideas. But this 3rd war of Gog and Magog is quite significant. And he and a few other taught that this is going to be a war that is distinguished from all other wars that have ever existed. And the prediction was that it's going to last for 18 minutes, that the effects of this war, even though it's an 18-minute war, that death, destruction, famine, and the effects of this war are going to continue for at least a year, and it's going to definitely impact a majority of the world population, and that many people will die. And so I find it very interesting that, you know, rabbis that are writing about these ideas, you know, over 100 years ago, about timelines and ideas that really they didn't have any context and seemed pretty ludicrous and ridiculous at the time. We can see the capabilities of these ideas coming true in our lifetime. So I think that in regards to genetic DNA and this connectivity that we're going to be finding, that these tribes will start to pop up, that people will be awakened. I don't think that you see when there's messianic, there are windows of opportunity opening in the world. We see windows of specific rectifications, opportunities to do a specific task opening in the world, that God provides energy. And sometimes this energy, if it's not used properly, is actually turned against the Jewish people. And I really believe that the Zohar and the rabbis that understood these passages in the Zohar that pointed to an 1840 to 1940 period of time really saw one of these. This was a period of opportunity for the gathering of the exiles coming into the land. And if that energy wasn't utilized properly, it would reverberate against the Jewish people and be used as a weapon. And interestingly, in the period of time, and this is something that I really didn't understand many years ago when we came across this phenomenon, you see an awakening in interest in Torah and Judaism and conversions to Judaism coming at these times of intense Jewish persecution. It happened in the 1st century. There were various messianic movements. They happened a lot in the Galilee region. Some of them were in Jerusalem. You have the Essenes who split off in their own group. But interestingly, in the period of time leading up to the destruction of the Second Temple, you see a massive amount of interest in the Roman population and Greek populations in the Roman world, in Torah and synagogue and Judaism. And there was a great interest outside of Christianity. There was a great interest in just Torah Judaism. And you see the same thing happening at the turn of the 20th century. You have Christian organizations specifically looking at the Hebrew roots of Christianity, looking at forming Hebrew congregations. To some of it, not all of it was just evangelizing the Jews. Some of it was, in fact, there's an extreme interest in Jewish studies and Jewish mysticism and Jewish books. You have some of the first authors that publish Jewish texts in the English language starting to look into these things in the 30s and the 40s. And so there's a resurgence in Torah and Judaism that comes at these times where there's opportunities. And if that energy isn't utilized in the proper way, then that energy reverberates back on the Jewish people and it becomes their destruction. And I really think this rabbi is seeing one of these opportunities developing right before his very eyes, and he wants to use this energy for good. And he wants to use this energy, instead of missing this opportunity and having this energy go to the other side to be used as a weapon of destruction, to take this energy and in a very, Eastern kind of martial arts way, to take that energy and use it to elevate Israel as a whole. So he gets a lot of flack, he gets a lot of resistance, and you can see in some of the questions that he has. I'm saying he gets a lot of resistance in that it's his ideas are new, and his interpretation of information is new to a lot of Jewish people. And he's not basing it from nothing. He's basing it a lot of his, his great-great-great-great-grandfather, the Vilna Gaon, and other rabbis that came before him that saw very clearly the time period that we're entering into. So I don't think that, he's an aberration. I really think that he is another indication of, hey, we have to take a look, and this is a sign of the Messianic kingdoms. Do you think there's any way that the 18 minutes could be figuratively speaking? The way that I've seen it, the way that I've read it, and the way that it's been taught is no, it's not a figurative. It's not. I don't think it's taken figuratively. So I really, the way that it's spoken of is it's a literal. It's a war, the conflict that lasts for this 18 minutes of time, and it's very interesting. I'll post Rabbi Anab, I'll find it before I have to go to bed. And I'll post this information. While some of this is frightening and kind of dark, I think that at the other time, you see these things, and instead of getting caught up in the negativity and the dark side of these possibilities, there's always the possibility of teshuvah and repentance and turning this energy, taking the time, taking this tide of energy and using it to bring about our redemption. Because up until the last possible moment, that redemption can still come miraculously from above instead of painfully from below. And so I think that with the it's always we live in this world where we live in this indeterministic world. This indeterministic world is created through reality of physics, but also spiritually through the power of hashgacha, which is divine providence. And everything is predetermined, but nothing is set in stone until it actually happens. So we live in this indeterministic world where our actions and our words, our thoughts, our speech, how we connect, who we connect, what we do or don't do, all of these this energy reverberates to the spiritual, in the spiritual worlds, and comes back to us. And so nothing we do in bringing people to repentance, or the hard work where this rabbi is doing, or other people, whether it's you taking on a new mitzvah or saying a prayer, or just one act of kindness tips the scale to the other side. So there's no energy wasted that's directed towards Hashem with the proper kavanah. So I think that until we're there at the very last moment, until these actions actually happen, I think that we live in this indeterministic world where we can tip the scales the other way. Because there were parts of me when I was younger that saw this as like kind of like a nihilistic, fatalistic kind of interpretation of Jewish texts, and I don't have that negativity that I had as a teenager. I'm gonna have to look and see exactly who was being referenced. I will post Rabbi Anava's teaching. I do believe that he references that. Yeah, 18 minutes. Yeah, I went through training for emergency response through, what do they call it? The Federal Emergency Administration, FEMA, whatever they are now, or they're still FEMA, talking about like these worst case scenarios, and they're grim. They're pretty grim. So like, but I have to say, Rabbi Nava is the consummate positive man, and I will post his. He does a beautiful job. He does it much more. He does a much better job than I could possibly do. So anyway, thank you so much for joining, and I'm going to have to bow out, but I will post a couple of those things, and I really, Baruch Hashem, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's such an immense blessing that you have you here. And if you have any questions or comments, please don't be afraid to post them in the group. So I'm going to say shalom.
Thank you. Yeah, we have the Torah Fundamentals group, which I think everyone here is in.
I posted
If not, join it. She's already posted some stuff in there.
And then the one about
Sneaky. She already posted things in there. And we'll post more. Now, what we're going to do is continue this discussion on the 10 tribes and other aspects of it, like during the week and related things. But next Saturday night, we're going to have another video, a little shorter. It's actually broken up into a bunch of sections, which is I'm not going to give it away yet, but it talks about one of the reasons or purposes that the children of Israel were scattered across the world. And a very scientific look at it, and what all that means. So we're going to take it to the other levels over the next week or two with this topic, and then from here, from this topic, we'll decide between now and then which direction we want to head. Obviously, all this stuff is interconnected. If you look back at our main outline that we talked about at the beginning of the night, it's posted in the Torah Fundamentals group. We have our outline of what this whole thing's about. But this is just the tip of the iceberg tonight. This is really incredible information, but it's not getting into the real deep mystical stuff yet, which we're going to get into with the tribes and other stuff down the road. This is kind of setting the foundation and showing what's going on in the world today and these bizarre and interesting connections. And now we're gonna go from here, as I said, and show some of the scientific reasons, if you will, of why this is the situation, and then we're going to delve even further deeper into the mystical reasons behind all of this, and then continue with other topics and do the same thing. So we're going to kind of look at each one at one level, and then back it up, and then the real connections are made, obviously, when you do back it up. That's where you start to see the real interconnectivity between everything. So this was all recorded, Luke, and I actually remembered to press the button, and it still says recording, so I didn't press it by accident again. So I'll post this in Torah Fundamentals. There was some good commentary there, yeah, especially toward the end, and lots more to come. But the video is good, and the commentary from Elisheva obviously is always good. So, so as you listen to it again, if anyone gets the opportunity to listen to this again, and some of the things she was talking about, if you have other comments or questions, post them in the Torah Fundamentals group. Obviously, this is the chat box here is going to be history as soon as we close this window. So I'll post it there, and continue to invite friends into Torah Fundamentals if they're interested in learning these things. And as I mentioned, we're going to use that group for this study on all of these things related to the world we live in and the time that we live in right now. Over the next number of weeks, we're going to dedicate most of our efforts in the Torah Fundamentals group to this outline from the Vilna Gaon and these different topics that are related. And then we'll pause. The plan right now, B'ezrat Hashem, is to pause at Sukkot. What we do, if you're new to this, what we do at Sukkot for the last several years is we play a movie, but we pause through the movie. The movie is called Ushpizin, and we pause throughout the movie to have some discussions on these hidden aspects that are behind the story, behind the characters. And we have a website. It's called the Ushpizin Movie Web. It's part of the 13 Petals website, which I'll post the link to at some point in the Torah Fundamentals group, which kind of will it's there so that if people are new, they can get caught up quick. Because obviously, as we continue to try to develop and advance on certain themes, it's hard for somebody that's maybe new to a lot of this stuff to come in because we're not going to repeat everything we talked about 4 years ago, 5 years ago. We're moving forward as a group, but we also want to lay down the ability, some information for people like catch up quick. So the Ushpizin Movie Web is for that purpose. It's for people to catch up quick to what that's about, and that way they can kind of catch on to the discussion where we pick it up. We do review some stuff, but if someone's like completely new and unfamiliar, they won't make a lot. Some of it might be hard to follow, and then you're lost if you don't grasp the fundamentals, and then we start getting into other things. It's just very difficult. So that's what the Ushpizin Movie Web is there for them to look at and all of that. So. And Ushpizin, of course, ties directly to the Omer count on the other side of the calendar, because the Ushpizin, the 7 days of Sukkot, are just a reflection of the 7 weeks of the Omer count with the same ideas, the same themes for each day, are the same themes for each week. So which is all the whole process of Tikkun, of Teshuvah, and all these things that we're doing right now or should be doing. And so anyhow, it's all good. So, like I said, I'll post this evening's conversation with the video in the group. Please invite any friends to come join the group, and specifically, if they want to, you think it would be interesting to people for them to play this whole video and see what they think. And any other comments or questions before we call it a night? So next week we'll continue on this theme of 10 tribes, and we're going to look at some very interesting video clips on the scientific reasons of why these tribes might just be scattered around the world as they are, which will be completely different than what we watched tonight, but a whole other perspective. So. Yeah, I'll post it probably tomorrow. I don't know if I'll get to it tonight, but I'll post it tomorrow for sure. All right. I'm just going back here. If I missed anything, we're back. Okay, good. All right. Question? What is ABC? You had a question? What is a slave? I don't know what the context of your question is. A slave is a slave. I don't know. It can mean a lot of different things. So I don't know the context of what you're asking. The slave, we talked earlier about slaves that were brought over on the ships, over from primarily from Western Africa over to the Atlantic, this side of the country, down into the islands in Brazil and of course North America. That's physical slavery. I mean, you can be a slave to bad habits. You can be the slave, can mean a lot of different things depending on context, but it's generally never good. It always implies some type of restriction, although it can be used in another sense. You can be a slave to God, a slave to Hashem in a different way, that's not so, that's more by choice, I guess you could say. So again, it always depends on context. So. Some kind of slave of divine power. That's a whole other discussion, but I would not consider myself to be like a slave. I have, God sets the conditions in our world, in our lives. Everyone's life is a specific condition that God sets for them. And our goal is to understand that. Our goal is to meet that. And once we're successful with performing whatever mitzvot and other actions are necessary, guess what? We go to another level and we get to do more mitzvot and have a new condition. And that's a cyclical thing. And there's a purpose to it, because every time we do that, we bring repair to our soul and we get closer to God. And there's no limit to that, of course. So we continue to just get closer and closer to God. That's why he gives us these things. Sometimes they're tricky situations, they're challenges, they're tests, there's tribulations. This is all different things, and he knows what's best. And, that's how we have to try to understand life. It's not always easy. It's easy to talk about it theoretically like this, and then, God forbid tomorrow something horrible happens. It's like you lose your mind and you're all upset, and it's like we always kind of forget what we believed the day before, and that's part of being human. We struggle, and we should be supporting each other. It's another reason coming together, having these smaller groups and bigger groups on Facebook are so important, that we are here to support each other in many different ways, whatever it takes. So if we truly love God and are responsible to our, love, we're your brother and sister's keeper, then yeah, we should be looking for opportunities to help each other, because that's all part of that same equation. If God puts somebody in your life and you have a chance to help them, there's a reason it's there for you, not just for him or her. There's a midrash that says that when Ruth came back after Boaz had let Ruth pick from the corners of the field, and she came back and told her mother that she blessed him. And it's like, that's the midrash is saying that although she got to eat from the field, she blessed him, and that it was a much bigger spiritual blessing he received by her doing that, by her taking advantage of his generosity and charity. So, what happened with Yosef and his brothers? I don't know. Can you refine that question? That's a whole amazing set of things we're going to talk about at one point too. What that whole picture is about. And I can tell you one thing, that a lot of what we're going to talk about in the months ahead is going to be probably very new. We're not rehashing stuff that's, everybody's already heard, some of which is great. We're really diving into some very new and interesting areas. So that's why we're going to take our time with it too. And we're, trying in between all this life's little challenges, we're trying to do our homework here, research and things like that to put things together. We started with 10 Lost Tribes here because we have some, it's pretty reasonably safe territory. It's very interesting and all, but it's, so far at least it's, we're not getting too deep, but we will. ABC's question about slaves, Yosef and his brothers. I'm sorry, I'm tired. I'm not making the connection. Revelation of Torah of Mount Sinai imprinted onto DNA children. Could that be what draws non-Jews to Torah today? Interesting. Yeah, Joseph was sold into slavery. I just wasn't trying to fully understand what the question was. Been a long week. I'm a little fried. Tell you what, why don't we post some of these questions in the Torah Fundamentals group so we can all look at them and have time to look at them closely and go back and forth on them. That's what the group's for, to take our time with these things and discuss them together. But the idea of powerful events, imprinting themselves on people, and that, has both negatively or positively, finding, as she was saying, scientifically, what that can do, what that can mean for generations down. And it'll be real interesting down the road when we start getting to the deeper aspects of all of these topics to see how they interconnect, because we were talking just recently about stuff to do with meditation and some of the things we're doing in a meditation group that we started, and stuff we're about to get into there, which connects to the 12 tribes, and it's just really interesting. So this stuff's all going to come together. The Shekinah, she was mentioned earlier, the bride and the groom being separated and all that. And I was just reading a text today that's described the bed chamber of the Shekinah, the intimate bed chamber of the bride. Shekinah is the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies, of course, is a cube, a perfect cube structure, and there's connections there to other similar things that have to do with surrounding yourself with aspects of God, creating a place where the walls around you. In fact, the verse in Isaiah 49 mentions walls. It's interesting. But the idea of creating a place where it's just you and God, to make that deep connection within this, the idea of a cube with the six constant commandments above you, below you, to the sides of you. It's like the sukkah. It is very much the same as the sukkah. So we're going to get into a lot of that stuff as well too, both in this group and other group we do. If you're interested in deeper aspects of meditation, which is something we're looking at too, that's coming back. This is stuff that was, deeply ingrained in the practices of Israel years ago. Really connecting with God not only as individuals, but as groups together. This is stuff that we're investigating and going forward with as well in another capacity, another group. So if that's the kind of, if you're interested for real in that kind of stuff, just contact me. Send me a note. We do have stuff going on with that. But other than that, I'm going to call it a night and end the recording, and hopefully, Lord willing, post this in the group tomorrow and keep going forward. So some of you I'll talk to soon, and others I'll talk to later. So, Lila Tov and hasta la vista. All right. Thank you all very much. And like I said, keep an eye on the group, the Torah Fundamentals group, and we'll just continue to post things and exchange information and all that. I'll probably at some point put a web page or web section up. Definitely plan to put a section on the 13 Petals site so it can, and even in the group, the more information that we post, it kind of gets lost down the feed at the bottom, and it's hard to go find things. It's not organized. So unless you're checking it every day, and even then, you got to scroll down a mile. So what we're going to do is create on the website, we have 13petals.org. We're going to create a section for this study and other things we do, so that there's organized permanent archives of information for people too. So this is kind of like the experimental stuff that we do with these Zoom groups and studies and things. And then once we have something that makes sense to share, we can put it on a website with whatever is needed. That's kind of the plan and how it works. So, okay. This time I mean it. I'm going to say good night. Good night, all. Shalom, shalom.